I just got back from my 7th Royal Caribbean cruise the other week, and having gone on a cruise and kind of taken a look back at where things are right now, there are definitely some important lessons that I've learned and takeaways from going on a cruise right now. So I've got the takeaways that you should know about for going on a cruise up next. Hey everyone, it's Matt from RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com, and cruise ships are back. Sailings are back. You can go back on a cruise ship again. It's fantastic, but things have changed, obviously. I think that almost goes without saying. And while the cruise industry has really gone a long way to make the experience still very similar to what it was like before the cruise industry shut down due to COVID-19, there are still some things that are different, obviously. And I think going on a cruise today, while it is actually a lot more like what it used to be, there are still some big differences you should know about. So it's not quite back to quote unquote normal, but taking a cruise right now requires a little more planning, a couple more hurdles to overcome, and a large amount of flexibility for all the protocol and rule changes that may or may not occur leading up to your cruise. And while some of these changes are indeed hassles, I'll be honest with you, they do bring a new opportunity right now. And I still think going on a cruise right now is the best time to go on a cruise because of one of those big changes, which is the limited capacity that cruise ships have. But today, I wanted to talk about kind of the big takeaways that I just learned after going on a cruise, and kind of looking back at the summary of all the experience having sailed on Odyssey of the Seas and other ships in the last couple of months. So the first big takeaway is that before your cruise, there are a lot more things you had to do. Before COVID-19, before your cruise, all you had to do was pack your stuff, bring your passport, and show up on time, or at least on the same day, and you're pretty much set to go. But now there's a lot more that goes into it. Royal Caribbean requires all of its passengers to get a pre-COVID test, which has given a lot of people a lot of anxiety about getting that test result back in time. For fully vaccinated passengers, you need to get your test done 2 days before you're sailing. And for unvaccinated passengers, it's 3 days before the sailing. And by the way, this has changed, and everything I just said, you should probably verify before you go on your cruise because it just changes a lot, which is something else we'll talk about in just a little bit. But, leading up to your cruise, you got to get that test done, and you got to get it done in time. You get it done too early, doesn't count. You get it done too late, well, you're not going to get the results back in time. And that's given people a lot of issues with getting test results in time because, of course, not only are cruise ship passengers trying to get tests done, a lot of other people are as well. So the usual places like pharmacies, which offer testing very conveniently, are usually inundated. So it just requires a little more planning ahead of time. And on top of that, there's also getting to the cruise terminal itself. Now, I'm lucky that I live in Florida, so for most of my cruises, I've been able to drive to it somewhere in Florida. But if you have to fly to your cruise, there's a whole nother level of rigmarole you have to go through in terms of giving the airlines all the proper protocols and documentation that they require. There's a lot that goes into it. So the pre-cruise process has definitely changed. I think it's actually changed the most. But the good news / bad news is most of the changes, most of the work is really upfront leading up to the time of you getting on the cruise. So my best advice for you is to be very aware of all the pre-cruise things you need to do and make sure you bring all the documentation that you need, including your COVID vaccine card, your pre-COVID negative test, and of course the usual stuff like passports, cash, and all that beforehand. And in addition, Royal Caribbean's app is even more important. Make sure you do your online check-in so that way you have a check-in time, because those do matter now, and arrive at the terminal exactly the time that they specify. Next up, kind of related to the pre-cruise process, and that is the onboard policies really do change all the time. Royal Caribbean is only putting out protocols basically about a month or so in advance. In fact, for the month of October, Royal Caribbean put out the protocols in 2 phases, early October and late October. And this is a result, quite frankly, of a lot of changes in policies. Royal Caribbean is trying to juggle not only its best practices within the company, but also what the U.S. government and other governments are offering in terms of protocols and requirements. The CDC has been certainly a very noticeable source of protocol changes as they update their requirements and their recommendations for cruise lines. And all that basically means is the rules for cruises right now today may not be the same for when you actually go on your cruise. Even if you have a cruise for later this year in 2021, the protocols for October may not match up to what you'll actually experience. Now, in my opinion, it's going to be very similar to what you can expect, certainly, but we've seen a lot of changes in just the last couple of weeks, and really that's been a constant throughout the restart process going all the way back to June. Rules are going to change, and even when you go on a particular ship, you may find certain protocols in place. On other ships, not so much. It's just the nature of the beast right now when it comes to cruising. Now, for some folks, they look at that and say, oh, geez, that's just confusing and awful. And for other folks like myself, I say, listen, It's part of the game right now, but it's still worth it to go on the cruise because it's still a lot of fun. You just have to, be aware of what Royal Caribbean is letting you know. And the best way to let you know that is to inform you via email before your cruise when the policies come out. Of course, your travel agent can also be a really good resource of information on those policies. And on top of all of that, you can always check the policies at Royal Caribbean's website. So the policies do change. It's not you. You're not missing something necessarily, but you should be on top of what the policies are so there are no surprises. My next lesson I've learned is you can and probably should do your e-muster from pretty much anywhere. Arguably the best thing to come out of the cruise industry shutdown and COVID-19 has been the innovation of e-muster, where instead of going to your muster drill, you now do your muster drill via your phone. It's so easy, so convenient, and I've kind of found that it's really smart now to do your e-muster while you're doing something else, or you are somewhere else. You're sitting at the bar, you're in your stateroom, you're hanging out with friends somewhere on the ship. It might be a good idea to take your phone out, do the e-muster quickly so you can get it done with, but take advantage of multitask. That's really the name of the game when it comes to e-muster because the information is really easy to digest. It doesn't take very long at all. And then that way you can get it knocked out and taken care of. I think it's really easy to say to yourself, oh, I'll do that later, I'll do that later, I'll do that later. And then inevitably you're that person that's being told over the PA system to please do the e-muster drills. Take it care of early, but don't feel like you have to stop everything and do it. Try to make sure you're doing it while you're doing something else. So that way you can, again, multitask and take advantage of what e-muster has to offer. Another lesson learned is maybe a surprise to you because I am a big geek, but that is you can still ask for printed menus. So I love Royal Caribbean's app. I love what they've done with it. I love the shift to digital. That's fantastic. As a geek, I'm always for that. But I really do think when you go to a restaurant, the QR code thing to look at the menus, overrated. It's just not, number one, you're not going to get COVID from touching a menu. Number two, when you're at a restaurant, I think there's just something about having a menu in your hands, not so much the tactile having it there and being able to feel it, but being able to quickly glance over the menu, look back quickly. It's just a part of the experience that makes a lot more sense. And on top of that, Royal Caribbean has actually updated its printed menus to a new type of material that is less conducive for spreading disease on it. So I say when you're at a restaurant, whether it is a specialty restaurant or the main dining room, to ask for a printed menu, even if the waiter says, hey, you can use your QR codes here to scan it. That's cool. But you know what? I think in this case, it's actually better to ask for those printed menus if you so choose. I alluded to this next lesson actually a lot earlier, but you know what? It's still the case, and that is there are no crowds, and it is fantastic. When you're on a Royal Caribbean cruise ship that can handle 3, 4, 5,000 passengers, and there's only about 1,000 or so on board, it's an incredible experience, and it is definitely spoiling me right now. I'm not sure I can even adjust going back to the old way, but I'm here to tell you that right now is the best time to go on a cruise because all that pre-cruise hassle you had to go through, it's all worth it when you get on board because there are no more crowds, and it is really noticeable when you're on those big ships, the Oasis class ships, the Quantum class ships, even the Voyager class ships. It really makes a difference, and it is really nice having just a fraction of the amount of people on board because there's no waiting. You don't wait for the elevator. There's no lines for restaurants. The buffet is not inundated. It's super easy getting off the ship. There's no lines. It's an incredible experience, and I've gotten used to it, quite frankly, at this point, and I love it. And I think the fact that crowds are gone right now is something that is truly one of the best reasons to go on a cruise. Now, this won't last forever, and eventually we'll get back up to capacity being 50, 70, 80, 100%. Not sure exactly when that'll be, by the way. Royal Caribbean has not announced which ships will be at what capacity and when. It's just a guessing game at this point as to how many rooms they've sold, and you won't really know until you get on board the ship. So with all that in mind, I still think it's pretty much a safe bet that if you go on a cruise over the next couple of months, you can pretty much assume it's going to be very much at a low capacity, which is to your advantage, so enjoy it while you can. And with that limited capacity, by the way, that leads me to my next lesson learned, which is that the onboard service is even better. With less passengers and still a lot of crew on board, you're going to have amazing service. In most cases, you go to bars, you go to restaurants, there's like more crew members there than there are passengers, which is unfortunate for them, but good for you because you're getting a great ratio of crew members to guests, and it's just amazing service. And on top of that, the crew members are really excited to be there. They're happy to be there. They love it, actually, because these are the same people that, just like you, were out of a cruise ship for many, many months, but in their case, they were out of work for many, many months. And this is the work that they absolutely love. So I think actually the crew are more excited to be back on board than you might be. And the last lesson learned, and this is something that I probably should have started with because I think it is actually the most important, and that is that COVID-19 cases on ships do happen, but they're extremely rare, and that is really because of the excellent protocols. Royal Caribbean spent months leading up to the cruise industry restart developing its protocols, testing things out, revising, testing, revising again, and it shows. Have there been COVID cases on board ships? Yes. Have there been COVID cases on ships that I have been on? Yes. But you know what? They've been limited, isolated, and taken care of properly, and it's really given myself, and I think a lot of other people, peace of mind that if you're going on a cruise, it's not an automatic, oh, if there's a COVID case on board, that's the end of it. The cruise can continue, and most importantly, the cases are being treated in a really smart way. On top of all that, all the adults are vaccinated on board. All the kids who are unvaccinated are tested multiple times. On top of all that, everyone gets tested before the cruise. While I am definitely not any kind of public health expert or scientist, I do feel honestly that when I go on a cruise ship, it is one of the safest places I can go because I cannot think of anywhere else in the world that has that level of testing and vaccination requirements. And at the end of the day, these extremely strict protocols are what is making the cruise ship restart possible and continuing to be safe. And for those reasons, I actually like them. And so if you're going on a cruise and you're worried about, oh, geez, COVID-19 on board, the good news is that cases are relatively rare. Unlike airplanes, your supermarket, schools, or anywhere else in between, there's actually hard protocols in place to ensure that any cases are caught and treated in a very smart manner. So there's the things I've learned on my last cruise that just went on, and really that's been a compilation of experiences over these last couple of cruises. While there are plenty of changes, and some of them, especially before the cruise, can have you scratching your head a little bit, it is still totally worth going on board. And at the end of the day, when your cruise finally comes to an end, you will still be extremely disappointed you don't have another day on board because it is still that much fun. Let me know in the comments what your experiences have been going on a cruise, any lessons that you've learned from going on a cruise in 2021. I'd love to read those as well. And while you're down below our video, hit that like button to let YouTube know you like this, so that way other people get to see this video as well. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on your notifications so that way YouTube lets you know when we have a brand new video to share. This has been Matt from RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com, and we'll talk again real soon.